So the rumblings got stirred over the weekend with the visit of Mark Gronowski to Iowa City, and the confidence meter kept going up and up and up, and it is 100% completed at this point. Just moments ago, Mark Gronowski from South Dakota State through the transfer portal to Iowa to possibly be the Hawkeyes 2025 starting quarterback. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Please leave those comments and questions in the chat. One of the reasons we're late, basically, Corey posting a video. So go directly from our conversation from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Check out Corey's synopsis of what went down with the Hawkeyes and Gronowski today. Hey, Corey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, timing is impeccable. In a sense, it was unfortunate because it kind of gives us with very little time to get things done, but obviously huge for Iowa. I called him the odds-on favorite. I mean, I would be shocked if he's not the starter. I'll be shocked if he's not the starter. He's got 1 year left. He was at one point really thinking strongly about the NFL draft, and he's passing on that. So I know for a fact he's getting a bag. And how big of a bag, who knows? But he probably deserves it. They needed to throw everything they had at him. That's going to limit what they can do probably away from quarterback, but they needed a quarterback and they got one. And I think the room looks a lot better without question after this announcement.
Yeah, it is simply the most important position on the field, and Iowa certainly has not been completely confident with, or the fan base confident with, that starting quarterback since probably Nathan Stanley in 2019. So here we are with a first-rate player coming in from the FCS. And when you make this statement about being extremely confident of his starting status this fall, does that come from the standpoint of you just think way too much has been invested, both in regards to money and from the Gronowski side, his eligibility and his path and trying to navigate his path to the NFL? Or is it more about based on what you've watched, based on what you've gathered from other people who have scouted him versus what we see out of Brendan Sullivan, that it's just not going to be much of a battle?
Well, I mean, I want it to be a battle, right? I think that's one lesson learned from what happened with Cade McNamara. Not that they did tell Cade when he committed that he was the guaranteed starter. We obviously know Kirk has had a history of, in some regards, at least from our standpoint, the outside looking in, favoring one guy over another. And that has frustrated people. But you also wonder how much of that was assurance when he initially got here that, hey, barring colossal failure, you're going to be the guy. But it's a different era now with Tim. I mean, he was part of that this year, but it was his first year at Iowa. And I just think based on what I've seen from Gronowski, his resume outweighs. I mean, I know it's at the FCS level, but I think this is one of the bigger. Here we go. This is one of the bigger transfer stories so far this offseason for anybody. I really do. As far as an individual impact on an institution. And we probably said similar things. I'm not going to, lie about that. We said similar things after the Cade stuff. We thought that was going to turn out differently. We thought that was what Iowa needed. And it didn't work out. But as I said in my video that I just published, I think Gronowski's got a better arm. He's more mobile. He's clearly less injury prone. He did have a serious knee injury, but it was literally 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. He's played a really high level since then. He's been, and unlike with Cade, where Cade is winning a lot with his team and putting up good numbers, but not great, Gronowski's put up phenomenal numbers and he's been named, Missouri Valley Conference Offensive Player of the Year multiple times. He was the Walter Camp Award winner in 23. He was a finalist again for that award this year. So, I just think it's totally different. And I know you and I talked last show. I don't know how in tune you are with him, but he's been like one of the faces of FCS football now ever since that year, ever since 2021. And Iowa got a glimpse at him in 2022. And it's not like that offense tore through the Hawkeye defense in 22, but that team almost came in here and won. The dude's got moxie. He's tough. I said in my video, he's not as mobile and elusive as Brendan Sullivan, but he is mobile. He's got over 1,000 career, actually over 1,700 career rush yards. So he's a positive runner. And I just think arm talent wise, they haven't had somebody like this in a long time. And I'm hesitant with my predictions at quarterback, understandably so. But I cannot imagine a scenario in which he's not the starter unless he gets hurt. And that's always a possibility. I also wonder now what this means for Brendan Sullivan. I know he preached pre-bowl game that he was locked in no matter what, and he understood why they had to go to the portal at quarterback. But he's got 1 year left, Mark. And I just wonder, like, is he okay coming here and being the start? Is he confident enough in himself to return and say, I'm just going to beat out Mark Gronowski? Is he realistic enough to know that probably won't happen, but he's comfortable being the backup? Or does he recognize that he'll probably not be able to beat out Gronowski, so he ups and leaves? And just because the portal window's closed, he's a graduate. He's going to have graduated, and he'll be able to have dotted his I's and crossed his T's, and so he'll be able to do that. So anyways, those are all questions that need to be answered.
So in terms of Brendan Sullivan, I would think that all depends on what his goals are and what his aspirations are past college football. Does he legitimately think that he can continue playing? And I'm not saying that skeptically. I'm just saying it's obviously not a shoo-in that Brendan Sullivan's an NFL quarterback, whether that be a second or third stringer. But he'll have that opportunity. I would think that, if he turns in a decent season, whether that would be at Iowa or anywhere else, that he'll get invitations to NFL camps. So he will have that opportunity to extend his playing career. But I don't know how realistic he believes that is and how much of a factor that is in his planning and his planning for the future. Or he just sees it as, I want to play with the best football team that I can play with. And I believe that's Iowa. So I'm going to stay here. And they're fairly not likely odds, but obviously quarterbacks get hurt. Players get hurt playing football, that there's whatever the percentage chance that he's going to get on the field for many meaningful snaps against big teams and get an opportunity, even if he stays. Or like you just pointed out, maybe he thinks, despite all the writing on the wall, I am going to fight for this job, even though everything's stacked against me. And they obviously believe that this guy's better than me. I'm confident in myself to be able to win this quarterback battle.
That's the best case scenario. That's what you want. And Iowa needs to convince Brendan Sullivan. That's not fooling him. That's not lying to him. You have to explain to him that we're going to play the best guy, and you got to stick to that. Because I've not had those types of conversations with players, but when people on the outside have seen certain things like what we saw earlier this year with Cade McNamara and Brendan Sullivan, there's a perception on the outside that, why is Cade still the starter? Game after game. Why is he still the starter? Why is Brendan not being given a shot? So the question is, what percentage of players on the inside felt the same way? I'm sure some did. They had well over 100 players on the roster. I'm sure some were like, why is Brendan not being given a shot? In fact, I do know that there are some players that thought Brendan was the better option. So my point is, if that was there then, now you have to make very clear, even though maybe you've been preaching that for a long time, you have to make very clear to everyone that we are going to play the best guy. And then you have to make it abundantly clear that you're sticking to that. And that, to me, that starts in spring. That starts in who's getting the 1 reps in the spring. If you go into the spring and Mark Gronowski is getting 90% of the reps with the 1s, then that gives Brendan Sullivan no sense of confidence that he's anywhere close. Now, if Mark Gronowski takes a massive step, start a spring ball, and he's clearly the better option, fine. But it's going to be hard to know that first week of spring, right? Like, there's nothing, neither one of these guys have earned the job yet, is my point. So Iowa has to make abundantly clear to both guys, best guy wins. And that's only going to make both of them better. And if Brendan came in for red zone play this year with Cade. I don't know that Tim Lester would be opposed to playing both guys. I think it's abundantly clear he's comfortable playing more than one quarterback. Kirk is probably a little bit more adaptable to that than he has been with Tim at the head of the reins, so to speak. So no, this is as big of an ad since Cade McNamara. And I'm just thinking back to when Cade committed, how big it was, how big of a deal it was. It was huge. It didn't work out. It was huge. This is huge. There's no guarantees with this business, and it is a business. There are no guarantees, but it's as big as Cade.
It is as big as Cade, and for certain people, the only reason it would not be at this moment as big is because Cade McNamara was playing on a big stage, obviously at Michigan, won a Big Ten championship, played in the playoff, and everybody was watching his career because it was being played in front of 15 or 20 million people in Ohio State games and Big Ten championship games. But from a talent standpoint, as you've just pointed out, and I'm sure you did on your various shows and this particular video that just got released, and we talked about over the weekend, Gronowski has a better upside than Cade McNamara. And if he just reasonably fulfills his potential and the expectations, just from a reasonable standpoint, it's a significant upgrade from Cade McNamara. And, if Tim Lester gets to throw the ball as much as I think he would like to, and that's not a crazy number of times, we're talking about raising the statistical profile of an Iowa quarterback from throwing 10 or 12 touchdowns a year to maybe in the low 20s, something like that, and probably having a 3-to-1 touchdown to pick ratio, something in that range, and posting a really strong season. Now, back to your point about him being the biggest pickup in college football, or I know you weren't making a declarative statement, but you were saying he could be.
You said one of.
Well, I got to say that this is something I've been, obviously I cover it all the time, but specifically we've been doing an update every day. So I've really been looking at the transfer portal. I can't argue with that statement. Even if you said you think he's the biggest, I wouldn't be able to say, no, he's not.
Well, there haven't been many.
He's one of the biggest.
There haven't been as many high profile ones, right?
No, the quarterback position's nowhere close to what it was last year.
Yeah, there's not a Dylan Gabriel from UCF there's not a Caleb Williams, there's not a Joe Burrow, these guys that are hopping around. That hasn't happened as much. Even the Oregon State kid that went to Clemson. Yeah, it's just I don't know who else out there has more proven. Name one quarterback that's more proven on the field in college than Mark Gronowski. And it's hard to weigh FCS versus FBS.
Sure. In totality, no one off the top of my head. Quickly, just to go back to the previous part of the conversation. Yeah, last year's quarterback class in the transfer portal, I thought was remarkable. There were 15 surefire starting quarterbacks for major programs moving to various places. You could argue guys like Miller Moss obviously played at USC. So again, you're weighing more success.
Oh, yeah. A lot more.
It's not even arguable. Yes. At the FCS level versus playing at USC and playing obviously the opponents that they play.
Prebula was a pretty significant one going from Penn State to Mizzou, but the guy never started. Connor Wiegman was a big one that goes to Houston, but guy never, he played some, but
he was the starting quarterback at Texas A&M 2 half seasons. So a full season, if you put the last 2 years together, that's pretty significant.
Murphy is one, right? The Murphy
Malik
kid.
Murphy, Duke. I think he threw 26 touchdown passes this last year. He's really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's in the category. He's on the list. Especially once you put together the back half of the statement was the significance to the program.
Yes.
As well.
Do you mind if I share
go right to it? I may turn a light on.
All right, here. While Mark's doing that, I'll just share real quick. This is just moments ago from Pete Thamel of ESPN. And this is the tweet from Pete. I'll blow this up so people can see a statement from Mark Gronowski to Pete Thamel on ESPN. He says, quote, "It's a great coaching staff," speaking about Iowa, "with Coach Tim Lester being there and being in the NFL last year and bringing an NFL offense to Iowa. It's a great opportunity to develop as a player, learn an NFL offense, and win a lot of games." And Pete did tweet out, according to ESPN's rankings, Mark is the overall number 4 quarterback remaining. I don't know who they have above him, and the number 19 overall player. And so the one thing I brought out on my show, and I think I did point it out here a second ago on this, is this hurts them NIL wise. And I don't mean to sound like Debbie Downer. The reality is, though, it's gonna provide a punch to the collective. It's gonna cost some money. And I mean, I don't know what they paid the kid. I don't know. I mean, I heard numbers about Cade McNamara, and I have an idea, but I'm guessing this kid probably demanded a little more. I mean, the market has changed so much since then. And so then my question is, how much does Iowa have to pay a kid like Sam Phillips from Chattanooga, who, by the way, sounds like is back in the mix for Iowa after he had scheduled a visit for USC, but it sounds like maybe he didn't go on that visit. I've not spoken with Sam Phillips, but last I knew he was considering Iowa and Virginia Tech, but he was scheduled to visit USC, and that visit has since not occurred. And so it sounds like maybe he's back on the table. They did miss out on Cam Thompson from NIU. He committed to Mississippi State yesterday, a talented Husky receiver who Iowa was in on and had scheduled a visit to come to Iowa City. There was chatter about Mark's old teammate, Griffin Wilde, who was an excellent receiver at South Dakota State. He has since committed to Northwestern. And so I'm trying to think of other guys, receivers that Iowa has been in on. Some of them have been off the board, but I think that the main target is, without question, still Sam Phillips. If they could add Sam Phillips with Mark Gronowski, then you have a potential of a really, really loaded, at least top of quarterback, top of receiver. Depth at both positions still very much questionable. It's still, they're not going to go from being poor rooms to strong rooms. But boy, if you could add Phillips with Gronowski, then you've probably done what you've needed to do on offense as it relates to the portal.